To anyone on the outside looking in, Dallas and Riley Elle Bennett were the kind of couple Hallmark movies were made about. He was 38, tall, dependable, a high school guidance counselor who drove a used Ford F-150 and never missed a Sunday at church. She was 36, elegant in a quiet way, the type of woman who made a silk scarf look like royalty and never spoke above a whisper. They lived in a tidy white colonial house on Lavender Hill Road, the kind of home that always had a fresh wreath on the door and candles flickering in the windows come dusk. They were admired. Envied, even. People in town said things like, "Now, that's real love," when they passed by holding hands at the farmer's market. They never fought in public. Elle never raised her voice. Dallas always looked at her like she hung the moon. But in the quiet spaces between compliments and casseroles, something unspoken pulsed beneath the surface. A pause in Elle's laughter. A quick look in the mirror that lingered too long. An unspoken line in her gaze whenever the word baby came up. Because after 5 years of marriage, baby talk had become more than pillow talk, it was pressure. Especially from Dallas's mother, Marion, who reminded them with every pie and pot roast that time was ticking. "You're such a beautiful couple," she would say, slicing pecan pie. "Don't you want to see what your genes could make together?" Elle would nod, smile tightly, and excuse herself to the bathroom. Dallas, ever the loving husband, didn't push. But he wanted it. A son to throw the football with. A daughter with Elle's high cheekbones. He'd started quietly researching fertility clinics, watching YouTube videos on IVF success rates. He even set up an appointment for a full reproductive consultation at Lakeshore Women's Health, under the pretense of getting ahead of it. Elle agreed, smiling, serene, though her voice shook when she said yes. Inside, she was screaming. Because Elle was hiding something. Something no one, not even the man who had vowed to love her, for better or worse, knew. And the appointment was only a week away. The morning of the consultation, the house smelled like cinnamon and espresso. Elle always woke early, curling her hair into soft waves, dressing in muted beige sweaters, slipping into low heels with military precision. Her makeup was minimal but flawless. Today, she wore pearl earrings and a simple gold chain. She looked beautiful. Unshakable. But her hands trembled as she held her coffee. Dallas came down the stairs in khakis and a flannel shirt, humming an old Eagles song. He kissed her forehead. "You ready, babe?" She smiled. Nodded. Said nothing. The drive to the clinic was quiet. Dallas chatted about upcoming school events, the new girl who'd transferred from Detroit, how she seemed troubled. Elle stared out the window. Each mile closer to the clinic felt like a countdown to collapse. Her palms sweated. She rehearsed lines in her head, how she'd explain the records, how she'd distract the doctor, how maybe she could fake something, anything, because the truth wasn't just painful. It was criminal in some people's eyes. Because Elle wasn't born Riley Elle Bennett. She was born Richard Ellis Monroe. Inside the crisp white walls of the clinic, Elle's world began to shrink. The nurse smiled warmly as they stepped in. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett?" Dallas nodded. Elle gripped her purse like a life vest. They were led into a bright consultation room. Magazines lay untouched. A model of a uterus sat awkwardly on a side table. Dallas squeezed her hand. "Whatever we need to do, we'll do it together," he said, smiling like the hero he always tried to be. She wanted to cry. Or scream. Or vanish. Dr. Helena Carrington walked in, all professional warmth and cool confidence. "So," she said, opening a chart. "You've been trying to conceive for how long?" "About a year," Dallas replied. "No luck. We figured it's time to look into options." The doctor nodded. "Of course. Elle, I'll want to do a physical exam today, with your consent. Just standard procedures, ultrasound, hormonal panels, pelvic exam, genetic history." Elle's mouth went dry. "Sure," she croaked. Dr. Carrington smiled and excused Dallas momentarily. The door clicked shut. And Elle's heart began to race. The exam began. Questions. Small talk. Gloves snapping. But then, silence. A long, clinical silence that felt like a blade. "Elle," Dr. Carrington said gently, "I need to ask, have you had any gender-affirming surgeries in the past?" Time stopped. Elle blinked. Her chest heaved once. "Yes," she whispered. Dr. Carrington froze. "We weren't informed in your intake forms." Elle didn't reply. I'll have to run additional tests. This alters the approach we take. I hope you understand. Elle nodded. Dallas was brought back in, unaware. Still smiling. Still hopeful. They drove home in silence. Elle stared straight ahead. Dallas tapped the steering wheel to the beat of the radio. We're gonna figure this out, he said. You okay, babe? She nodded. Yeah. Just tired. But inside, she was unraveling. That night, Elle stood in the bathroom, looking at her reflection. Not the woman in beige and pearls, but the child who had once looked at his own body with terror. The teenager who had bound his chest with tape and wept at the sound of his voice. The adult who fought, and scraped, and rebuilt, until she became her. She never thought she'd fall in love. Never thought someone like Dallas would see her, not as a secret, but as home. And now, that home was built on sand. She had thought love would be enough. That maybe she didn't have to tell him. That maybe she could just be. But the appointment cracked everything. Because when truth finds a vein, it bleeds secrets. And Elle's truth had just begun to bleed. The waiting room at Riverbend Women's Health Clinic smelled like lavender hand sanitizer and stale magazines. Dallas Bennett sat beside Elle, his knee bouncing, nerves masked beneath a smile. He wore his Sunday best flannel, trying to be supportive, but beneath that calm exterior? Doubts. Quiet ones. Ones he'd never dared voice. Elle sat still, poised, flawless. Her cream blouse was neatly tucked into tailored slacks, hair swept into a soft bun, minimal makeup highlighting her high cheekbones. She looked every bit the dignified woman she always did. But her hands betrayed her. Fingertips clenched white against her handbag strap. Her nails, always manicured, were chipped. Elle Bennett? A nurse peeked through the door. They followed her into the examination room. Dallas stood behind Elle, hand on her shoulder. The room was cold. Bright. Sterile. The gynecologist, Dr. Marianne Holloway, entered with a practiced warmth, clipboard in hand and a tight smile that meant business. Mrs. Bennett, she said kindly, eyes scanning Elle's file. And Mr. Bennett, thank you for coming. We'll start with a basic fertility evaluation today, and then run some labs. Dallas smiled politely. Elle gave a nod. Her voice barely lifted. Of course. The first half of the exam was routine, medical history, lifestyle habits, family planning goals. Elle answered in clipped sentences. Dallas watched her. He noticed something he hadn't seen in all their years of marriage: evasion. Then came the physical exam. Dr. Holloway was gentle. But something shifted. Her brow furrowed. She murmured, then went silent. She stepped away, removing her gloves. Elle, may I ask, have you ever had any surgeries we don't have records for? Elle froze. No. The doctor hesitated. There's anatomical incongruity. I'd like to run a chromosomal panel. Just to be thorough. Dallas blinked. Chromosomal panel? What does that mean? Dr. Holloway glanced at Elle. It's standard when we need a better understanding of reproductive health. Elle gave a tight smile. Sure. Whatever you need. They left the clinic in silence. Dallas didn't ask. Elle didn't offer. That night, she stood under the shower far too long. And Dallas stared at the ceiling, heart beating faster with every tick of the clock. 3 days later, the clinic called. The results were in. Back in Dr. Holloway's office, the air was heavier. Elle sat ramrod straight. Dallas looked at her, waiting for reassurance. She gave none. Dr. Holloway folded her hands. Elle, we ran the chromosomal panel. The results indicate that you carry XY chromosomes. Dallas blinked. What does that mean? The words came out like a gunshot. It means Elle is biologically male. Dallas didn't move. He didn't breathe. The silence shattered something inside the room. That's not possible, he finally said. Elle's eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. I transitioned before I met you. I've been on hormones for years. Surgery. Therapy. Everything. You never asked, and I never told. Dallas staggered to his feet. His hands trembled. You let me think you were a woman. My wife. You lied to me. I am your wife, Dallas. No, he hissed. You're not. Dr. Holloway excused herself, sensing what was unfolding wasn't medical anymore. Elle reached out. I wanted to tell you so many times. But you loved me. You saw me. And I couldn't risk losing that. Dallas pulled away. His eyes weren't filled with just betrayal, they were filled with horror. You let me plan a life with you. A family. Elle whispered, I wanted that too. He stood there, heart hammering, breath uneven. What else don't I know about you? She didn't answer. That silence was louder than any scream. They left separately. Elle didn't go home. Dallas did, but he didn't recognize the house anymore. The walls felt unfamiliar. The air was poisoned with questions. Every photo on the wall looked like a lie. Every memory twisted with suspicion. That night, he poured bourbon until his hands stopped shaking. But the tremor never really left. He thought of their wedding night, her hesitation, the dimmed lights, the carefully orchestrated intimacy. He thought of all the little things he ignored. The unopened mail. The bathroom cabinet locked. Her always being cold. Her never going to the pool. How had he not seen it? He wanted to scream. But all he could do was whisper to himself, who did I marry? Elle sat in a motel room down the street, staring at her reflection in a cracked mirror. Her face, so carefully sculpted, so proudly hers, felt foreign now. Stripped of her shield. She'd worked her whole life to become someone worthy of love. And now, she'd become a secret to be ashamed of. In the days that followed, news spread fast in their small Midwestern town. Whispers grew into rumors. And soon, rumors became judgment. Dallas couldn't leave the house without hearing a snicker or a comment. Elle became a phantom, nowhere and everywhere. But the storm brewing inside Dallas wasn't just humiliation. It was betrayal that dug into his ribs, gnawed at his gut, and morphed into something darker. His pride was fractured. His manhood questioned. The line between heartbreak and hatred began to blur. One evening, his best friend Trent showed up unannounced. A bottle of whiskey in one hand, and blunt words in the other. She lied to you, man, Trent said, pouring them both a glass. You got every right to be mad. Dallas didn't respond. He just stared at the glass. Then, slowly, he nodded. She broke something in me, he muttered. And somewhere across town, Elle looked at the wedding band she still wore. Foreshadowing whispered in the dark corners of their memories. Not every lie hides a fake identity, some hide a life. And Dallas? He was beginning to believe that love wasn't just dead. It had been buried alive. The drive home from the clinic was silent. Not the kind of silence born from peace, but the suffocating hush of a ticking bomb. Dallas Bennett kept both hands glued to the steering wheel, his knuckles bone white, his jaw locked so tightly it pulsed. Riley, Elle, sat next to him, motionless, eyes fixed on the passing scenery as if searching for a rewind button. He didn't speak. Couldn't. Because what words were left when you find out the woman you've loved, kissed, dreamed children with, was someone else entirely? At home, the air was brittle. Elle followed him inside like a ghost. She set her bag down, slowly, like it might explode. Dallas hadn't taken his shoes off. He stood near the fireplace, hands still trembling. You lied to me, he finally said, voice barely louder than a whisper. I didn't, Elle's voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to. But you did. You chose to let me build a life on a lie. Tears welled in her eyes, but Dallas didn't flinch. She stepped closer. He stepped back. I was going to tell you, she said softly. When? After the baby? After the wedding anniversary? After our parents died without knowing their son had been conned? That word, conned, it struck her like a slap. She flinched, but didn't speak. She just stared at him, all the years of rehearsed honesty cracking apart in her chest. She tried again. Dallas, I didn't lie about how I loved you. I've always been Elle. I never. You were born Riley James Ellis. I read it. The papers. The DNA report. The prescription logs. He stopped, choked by fury. And you let me take you to a gynecologist. You watched me sit in that waiting room. Do you know how stupid I feel? Elle folded into the couch, her arms wrapped tightly around herself like armor. You don't understand, she said. Then make me understand, he shouted, slamming his hand against the wall. A picture frame cracked and fell. Make it make sense why you let me believe, why you tricked me. She looked up, trembling. Because if I told you, you wouldn't love me anymore. The silence afterward was long. And heavier than the one in the car. The next days moved like molasses, and every second was filled with whispers, inside and outside the home. Dallas avoided calls. He didn't go to work. He sat in his garage, chain-smoking and replaying memories that now felt poisoned. Their honeymoon in Puerto Rico. The late-night talks. The shared bathtub. Everything, rewritten by one truth he hadn't chosen. The church called. His mother knocked. His brother left a voicemail saying, "I heard something. Is it true?" but didn't explain what it was. The town had started talking. Small towns always do. And Elle? She didn't leave the house. She slept on the couch. Ate alone. Journaled late into the night. The woman who once walked with elegance now moved like a shadow. Dallas found one of her journals. At first, he didn't mean to read it. He opened the drawer looking for car keys and saw the leather-bound book, frayed at the corners. But it fell open, like the universe wanted him to see. August 12, 2009. I started hormones today. My mom cried. Said I'd never be a wife, never be normal. I told her I just want to be me. January 3, 2012. Changed my name legally. Riley's gone. Elle is who I am now. But some days, I wonder, will anyone ever love me without asking what's between my legs? March 17, 2015. Met a man named Dallas at the library. He held the door. Smiled like he saw me. Really saw me. June 2, 2021. He proposed. I wanted to tell him everything. I wrote a letter, burned it. I'm selfish. But I've never felt this loved. April 6, 2023. The fertility appointment is coming. I'm terrified. I can't keep hiding. But if I tell him now, I'll lose everything. Dallas closed the journal. His heart should have softened. But it didn't. It clenched. Because now he wasn't just betrayed. He was pitted. She knew the risk. And she took it anyway. The town fed the flames. Someone from the clinic leaked the record. Dallas's cousin posted something vague on Facebook, "Not all women are what they seem." Comments poured in. Memes followed. Someone even tagged him in a photo of Elle from college, before the transition. And then came the letters in the mailbox. Slurs. Bible verses. Warnings. Sympathy cards that felt like mockery. Dallas felt cornered. Humiliated. Every glance at the supermarket was a judgment. Every handshake at church was a whisper. He couldn't walk through the park without wondering who knew. And Elle? She still tried. Made coffee. Folded his shirts. Left him space. But he couldn't unsee the betrayal. He couldn't unfeel the shame. And then, late one night, as he stared into the mirror, he whispered something that felt colder than rage. She took away who I was. He stopped coming home some nights. Stayed at motels. Told himself he needed space. But the truth was, Dallas didn't know who he was anymore. The man he used to be was gone, buried under gossip and grief. And he blamed Elle for killing him. In that same house, Elle sat quietly and wrote another journal entry. I told the truth. And it broke everything. I still love him. But maybe love isn't enough when the world teaches people like him to hate people like me. I'm scared. Of what he'll become. Of what I already am. Foreshadow, truth isn't always healing, it can be combustible. And soon, it would explode. It was almost midnight when Dallas Bennett stumbled up the steps of his porch, the taste of whiskey clinging to his breath and the weight of public humiliation clawing at his chest. Streetlights flickered across the quiet Midwestern suburb, casting long shadows on the manicured lawn. The same house that once felt like a safe haven now felt haunted, by whispers, by stares, and by the unanswered question pulsing behind his eyes, who did I marry? Inside, Elle stood in the kitchen, arms folded tightly across her chest. She had stopped crying days ago. There were no more tears to give, only silence, and the ache of a truth that had detonated everything they built. She wore his old sweatshirt, sleeves swallowed by her hands, like she was trying to shrink herself. But she didn't flinch when the door slammed behind him. You lied to me. His voice cracked through the room like thunder. Elle didn't respond. She had heard that sentence 1,000 different ways since the clinic visit. She took one breath, then another, and said quietly, I loved you. Dallas laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Loved me? You let me marry a stranger. You stood there at that altar with a damn secret stitched under your skin. I am not a stranger. Her voice rose now, trembling but clear. I'm the same person you danced with, built a life with. I didn't tell you because I was terrified. You don't know what it's like to be born in a body that doesn't match your soul. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. I don't know what you are anymore. Outside, wind stirred the trees. Inside, something darker twisted the air. Rage moved through Dallas slowly, sludge-like, seeping into the cracks of his grief. He began pacing, fists clenched. Elle stepped forward. Please. Just talk to me like you used to. I'm still me. But he wasn't listening. He reached the living room table and picked up her journal, the one she'd left out that morning, perhaps deliberately, as if part of her wanted him to read it. He waved it in the air, voice rising. You hid this too? You've been writing about this since you were a teenager? All these years, and you never said a word? Elle's voice broke. You wouldn't have stayed if I told you. No one ever does. Dallas's hand trembled. You made me look like a fool. The whole damn town knows. My coworkers won't even look me in the eye. My own brother said I married a freak. Her eyes widened, heart pounding. Don't call me that. A pause. Something in him snapped. With a sudden, chilling calm, Dallas walked into the kitchen and pulled the drawer where they kept the chef's knives. Elle took one step back, then another. Dallas. Please. Don't. The knife gleamed under the overhead light. He didn't scream. He didn't say a word. He lunged. Elle turned to run, but he was faster. The blade plunged into her side, and a gasp tore through her lungs. She crumpled to the floor. Blood spilled across the hardwood, bright red, alarmingly fast. She choked on her own breath, eyes wide with shock. As she lay dying, she whispered, I still loved you. Dallas stared down at her body, breathing hard, the knife still in his hand. His shirt was soaked in blood. He stood frozen for a moment. Maybe it was guilt, or maybe it was the realization that nothing would ever be the same. Then, panic set in. He dragged her body out the back door, arms trembling, breath short. The cold night air sobered him slightly. In the corner of the garden, he dug a shallow hole behind the hydrangea bushes where they'd once planned to plant a tree. His hands blistered as he clawed at the earth. Sweat and blood mingled on his face. When the hole was wide enough, he placed her inside, wrapping her in a tarp. He buried her phone, the diary, even the old medical records he had angrily pulled from her nightstand the week before. He covered everything with mulch and a plastic sheet, then smoothed the soil with trembling hands. He whispered a prayer. Not for her, for himself. The next morning, sunlight bathed the neighborhood. The local news carried on as usual. And Dallas? He made coffee. He ironed his shirt. He showed up to work like nothing had happened. Neighbors waved. He smiled back. But in the backyard, beneath 6 feet of dirt and secrets, lay the truth he could never erase. Days passed. Then weeks. People asked where Elle had gone. She left me, he'd say, with a rueful shake of his head. Packed up and walked away. Some things you never see coming. He kept his tone practiced. Calm. Almost pitiful. But guilt doesn't rot quietly. The police grew curious when Elle's social media went silent. When her job reported her missing. When her best friend said she never would have left without her dog. Officers came to ask questions. Dallas played the part, grief-stricken, abandoned. But his hands shook when they asked about that night. Because bones freeze in cold ground, but hearts shatter forever. And beneath the lies, Dallas's heart was already in pieces. He had murdered the one person who had loved him enough to live in silence. And that silence would soon scream. It started with a shovel hitting plastic. The new owners of the Bennett home had no idea what secrets lay beneath the backyard hydrangeas. They were newlyweds from out of state, eager to renovate the garden and build a life in a fresh home. On the third day of landscaping, the hired crew struck something solid under the mulch, first a piece of tarp, then bones. What they unearthed wasn't just a buried body. It was a story. A storm. A name once whispered in rumor but now shouted through headlines. Elle Bennett, missing wife of Dallas Bennett, had not run off into the night. She had been murdered and buried in her own backyard. The police cordoned off the property within hours. As forensic teams worked under the hot sun, a neighbor wandered over, concerned and curious. That neighbor, a retired librarian, noticed a small, mud-caked folder half buried near the fence. She turned it over to police, unaware that she was handing over Elle's most intimate truth, the diary. Inside were pages scrawled in blue ink, years of entries chronicling her gender identity, the fear of disclosure, the joy of finally loving someone, and the gut-wrenching fear that love would end if the truth was ever told. There were letters addressed to Dallas, drafts she never had the courage to send, even childhood memories of standing in front of mirrors, trying to imagine a world where she didn't have to hide. But now, there was no hiding anymore. The media frenzy hit like wildfire. Within hours, Elle's name dominated headlines across the country. Trans woman found murdered by husband, buried in backyard garden. A love story turned tragedy, the Elle Bennett case. When truth comes too late, Dallas Bennett's trial to begin. Photos of Elle smiling in better times, on their wedding day, walking her dog, laughing at the beach, were broadcast beside mugshots of Dallas, pale and gaunt in orange prison garb. The story split the town in two. Some refused to speak Elle's name, still insisting she'd lied her way into a marriage. Others stood outside the courthouse with candles and posters that read, "She was human. She was loved. She didn't deserve to die." Inside the courtroom, Dallas's defense strategy was simple: betrayal and rage. His lawyers argued that the revelation of Elle's trans identity had shattered him psychologically. That he'd snapped in a moment of emotional disarray. They painted him as a man duped, cornered, humiliated, a victim of deception, not a calculated killer. The prosecution dismantled that narrative piece by piece. They introduced the medical records, her journal, and photos from the crime scene, showing how Dallas had not only stabbed Elle but tried to erase her existence. He hadn't just buried her body, he had buried the truth, her truth, with it. This wasn't a moment of madness. This was a cleanup. A betrayal, yes. But whose? Witness after witness took the stand. Elle's best friend, sobbing as she described the fear Elle lived with every day. Her therapist, reading aloud one of her last entries, "If I tell him, I lose him. If I don't, I lose myself." Even Dallas's co-workers testified, some supporting him, others describing a man increasingly volatile in the weeks before Elle's disappearance. One admitted Dallas had joked cruelly about trans people being tricksters. Another recalled him snapping at a bar after being teased about Elle's identity. The courtroom was a war zone of emotion. The jury sat stiff, eyes dark, as they listened to tapes of 911 calls and saw images of Elle's grave. But it was the diary, presented page by page, that shifted the tide. Her words were quiet, soft, and scared. There was no manipulation. Only a woman who wanted to be loved without fear. Elle's identity was not a weapon. It was a wound. And Dallas had driven the knife in. Still, public opinion fractured. Some said he should have been tried for first-degree murder. Others argued he never stood a chance against a truth too big for his world. Talk shows debated it. Pastors preached about it. Families split over dinner tables. But in the end, it wasn't society that rendered judgment. It was 12 strangers, sworn in by law. After 3 days of deliberation, the verdict came. Guilty. Dallas Bennett was convicted of second-degree murder, a crime of passion, not premeditation, but still soaked in blood and cruelty. The courtroom was silent when the gavel fell. Dallas showed no emotion. Just a slow, vacant blink. He would serve 25 years in state prison with no chance of parole for the first 18. Outside, reporters huddled under umbrellas in the rain, microphones raised toward anyone willing to speak. Elle's sister read a statement through tears. "My sister lived in fear and died in silence. But today, she was heard. And we won't stop saying her name." Across social media, the hashtag #JusticeForElle trended globally. Trans rights groups held vigils in her memory. Candles flickered on courthouse steps, on porches, in windows. In one mural, painted across the side of a community center, Elle smiled beneath painted hydrangeas, above the words, "She lived as truthfully as the world would let her." But still, the pain lingered. Some neighbors kept their blinds drawn. Others whispered about the man who married a lie. The town had been forced to confront its reflection, and many didn't like what stared back. In a quiet cell, Dallas refused visitors. His mother sent him a Bible, unopened. He spent his days staring at the wall, haunted by the echo of Elle's last words, "I still loved you." But no penance could bring her back. In the garden where she once dreamed of planting a tree, the soil had been replaced. The hydrangeas, dead and uprooted. Nothing grew there anymore. Only memory. Only consequence. Because some secrets die in silence. Others are buried alive. If this story shook you, just wait. There's more where that came from. Candle subscribe now and step into the shadows where truth meets betrayal, love turns lethal, and justice never comes easy. Brain hit that bell so you never miss the next twisted tale that they tried to bury. Movie camera, because on this channel, every crime has a heartbeat, and every secret eventually bleeds.